Hello and welcome to Endemic Times. My name is Amira. How does one start a video on Palestine? This is something that I have been struggling with for days because what I realized is that those that are supportive of the Palestinian cause are not the ones that myself or others are trying to convince to make real substantive change. We're trying to convince those that have the most power, from our government to the electorate, who we need to have their minds changed, don't want to, don't care to, or won't even stay in the room long enough to have the conversation. Trying to find a bridge that is on the side of Israel that doesn't see the indiscriminate killing and subjugation that is apartheid as a problem. How do you create that bridge? I thought about making parallel examples to the indigenous Americans at the time of colonialism, or if China was to invade our country and divide us based on ethnicity, religion, or ideology. But at the end of the day, it doesn't seem to matter because, like I said, it's the ones that are in power that we are crying out to change, but they won't. They can't, and people continue to suffer. So this video is not going to try to convince anyone to support Palestine. It will simply show the devastatingly horrific situation that these people have been in for over 74 years. Their stories deserve so much more coverage. If we put them in perspective to what we see today, they are brown Ukrainians dealing with what they see as an invading power that is ruining their ability to have lives and have futures, that is killing them with one of, if not the most powerful armies on the globe. It's not a fair fight to any extent, yet they are the ones that are depicted as the terrorists. Palestinians have been sold out by their own and foreign powers, and they don't have blonde hair and blue eyes, so since the start of this year, 2023, and at the time of making this video, 41 Palestinians have been killed by Israel. The most recent event took place in the West Bank, in a refugee camp on Monday, where Israeli forces killed 5 Palestinian gunmen linked to Hamas. The military raid was meant to apprehend a militant cell that staged a botched shooting attack on a restaurant in a Jewish settlement in the West Bank. Hamas said that all 5 of those killed were members of its armed wing. Hamas spokesman Hazim Qasim said that the violence would be met with a response. Since this shooting, the Israeli military has blocked access to several roads into Jericho, which has placed the city under a semi-blockade, disrupting businesses and creating hour-long bottlenecks at checkpoints that even affected Palestinian security forces. In retaliation for the raid, the Palestinian Authority declared a halt to security coordination with Israel. It is these types of actions that Israel does against Palestinians that to most of the rest of the world and even the corrupt Rockefeller United Nations recognizes as meeting the classification of apartheid and an oppressive regime. But here in the US, those kinds of distinctions or classifications are simply inconvenient, so they get swept under the radar and are hardly ever discussed by mainstream media. I know. What a shock. On Thursday, January 26th, the Israeli military enforced a raid on a Palestinian refugee camp in Jenin, which killed 9 Palestinians and wounded 20. The military claimed the raid was conducted to find and capture jihad terror operatives. Friday, January 27th, marked the deadliest attack Palestinians have made on Israelis since 2008, with a Palestinian shooting and killing 7 people and wounding 3 near a synagogue. I'm saying near because there were a few differing accounts on where exactly it took place, so to both cover myself and also distinguish from what is usual Israeli propaganda to garner more sympathy, I will say it was near because honestly, I just don't know. Part of why the situation in Palestine is becoming even more of a powder keg than it already is because of the new far-right government that has made it clear that they are committed to the continued dispossession of Palestinians and expanding settlements. And since the Palestinian body politic is in shambles with no international stakeholder taking proactive steps, the crisis is likely going to continue escalating, said an international crisis group analyst. The far-right government officials are not afraid to speak their minds when it comes to their opinions, beliefs, and actions. Almog Cohen of the Otzma Yehudit party even tweeted, "Nice and professional work by the fighters in Jenin. Keep killing them." Twitter removed this tweet, but it is worth taking a second and just thinking about this. This is a government official of one of the most powerful militaries in the world, speaking with glee about the killing of Palestinians. Can you imagine if one of our government officials said something like this out loud? We know they likely think these things, but to have the gall to write it on a global application platform just kind of shows the mentality, the indiscriminate hatred, and frankly, the global community's absolute failure to get Israel to ease down on their actions towards Palestinians that mirrors almost everything they experienced from the Nazis, minus the gas chambers. The hypocrisy is astounding. In October last year, Cohen published a photo of himself in the military kneeling over a Palestinian father and his two sons with the caption, "Those down there remember what I did in the army." This brings to my mind Guantanamo and the horrific treatment that continues to this day. Where the fuck is the outrage? And this type of disgusting treatment towards Palestinians is not new. In 2013, the three Palestinians testified that officers tied them up and threatened to shoot them in the head. And Cohen is not the first far-right Israeli official to celebrate the killing of Palestinians. In December, Israel's new national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, hailed a soldier who shot dead a Palestinian man as a hero, describing the killings as precise, swift, and rigorous. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not making the situation between Israelis and Palestinians any better. If anything, he is fanning the flames of war and death that will precipitate more horrific killings on both sides, albeit not equal. Netanyahu plans to also make it easier for Israelis to acquire firearms and said that he would expedite gun permits for Israeli citizens and step up efforts to collect illegal weapons. That's basically code for we are going to do everything that we can to take away any ability of Palestinians to defend themselves and give our people as many weapons as possible. And on top of all of that, the Israeli police are encouraging those with existing licenses to carry guns. With this move, Netanyahu is giving the green light for Israelis to inflict violence upon Palestinians with full impunity. Well, I mean, that's already happening, but what I can't help but think of is what this would be like if one of our far-right government officials said they want the white supremacists here in the US to carry their weapons on them. I'm sure people won't like this comparison, but seriously, what other comparison is there? There is also the intention to expand illegal settlements in occupied West Bank and the annexation of Palestinian land, and all of this is notorious for inciting violence against Palestinians. Haifa-based analyst Diana Boutou said, "You have a minister of national security who has made it very clear that he believes in killing Palestinians. You have a minister of finance who has made it clear that Palestinians are here only temporarily. You can see the recipe is that more and more Palestinians are going to be killed." According to the Palestinian Authority's health ministry, more than 200 Palestinians were killed in 2022, making it the deadliest year for Palestinians in 16 years. And of those over 200 killings, Boutou said that not one had an investigation that led to charges. Not even in Shireen Abu Akleh, the journalist that was killed by an Israeli militant while wearing and acting in her capacity of the press, her case is probably the most investigated murder we have ever seen. She continued saying that 90% of attacks that settlers perpetrate against Palestinians, the police do nothing, the army does nothing, they just close off the file and no charges are laid. Last month, Al Jazeera submitted a formal request to the International Criminal Court to investigate and prosecute those responsible. When it comes to Israeli settlers, they are commonly walking around with not just handguns, but assault rifles. It's common, whether it's at the mall, on the bus, on the train, in religious places, to see people carrying weapons. The problem here is that it's not just a question of arming people. It's that this government has always given Israelis a green light to go ahead and shoot at Palestinians, whether it's on the level of the police or the army. Before I get into this next bit, I want you to think about something. You know how we have a problem here with mass shootings? There are a multitude of theories and reasons as to why we have the amount that we have happening here in the US. But I want you to imagine that the punitive punishment elicited by our government here in the US is to take possession of the home or dwelling that that mass shooter resided in. Think of a young kid here in the US that goes and shoots up his school. Imagine that the punishment for that is extended to their family. Well, that's what's happening with Palestinians. And also keep in mind, it's not even for actual assailants. It's for suspected assailants. Netanyahu has said that the homes of suspected assailants will be sealed ahead of demolition in order to exact an additional price for those who support terrorism. As Boutou continued on to say, she says that they are trying to extract punitive measures not just against individuals, but against their families. Now it's also taking a step forward of trying to strip them of their citizenship, trying to strip them of any national rights. Think about what our government did to the Japanese living here in the States following World War II. They were placed in internment camps. It's both sad and horrific that we don't have to step away from our own country and go that far in history to see that what the US is allowing in Israel is almost exactly what they have done to the indigenous Americans, the Japanese internment camps, and what I find as peak hypocrisy is the fact that so much of what Zionist Israel is doing to Palestinians mirrors the treatment that they received in Germany for a historical event that is constantly pushed through the mainstream narrative so that we never forget the atrocities inflicted against them and the continual use of that event to portray themselves as victims when the facts show that they weren't the only ones affected by that horrific event. Were they the bulk? Yes, but the convenient revisionist history that they have been able to create because of the amount of victimhood complex they espouse, while downplaying and gaslighting the level of power they have cultivated in almost all forms of media, be it print, television, or film, so that when someone brings any of this up, they are immediately critiqued as being an anti-Semite, and getting almost everyone to go along with it because heaven forbid you disagree with a victim, just shows how much power they do have. Anti-Semite is such a convenient epithet they sling because they have been allowed to perpetuate this victimhood and not let anyone forget it. They have taken first place on that pedestal, and anyone else be damned for just pointing over here or there and being like, so these people are being ethnically cleansed too, and it's like happening right now or happened close to a time in history to all of you. Armenia, anyone? Or what about events in Africa? Or arguably China? What about Cambodia? People are going to be mad here, and while I get it, someone needs to say it. They are not the only victims. They are not the first group to be targeted, and they are not the last. And the pinnacle of hypocrisy in all of this is the Zionist regime's treatment of Palestinians. When we look at the actions that are taken by Palestinians towards Israelis, it is not because of some unfound hatred that they have towards Israelis. It's because of how Palestinians are being treated, by what they see as an outside force that is using victimhood and an obscene amount of power and control that was handed to them by US, European, and Britain powers to come over and completely destroy a region and peoples. So when a 13-year-old boy opens fire on a small group of men walking down the street, instead of pointing to the hurt and the pain and asking the question, who hurt you? He is immediately labeled a terrorist because that term elicits fear, it elicits hatred, and most egregiously, it creates the narrative around the individual or individuals that take these actions, albeit wrong and condemnable. But it dehumanizes these people that go to such lengths to inflict pain and does nothing to understand why this is happening, and why would someone resort to taking such an action. When we look at the narrative that has been spun around Ukraine and the labeling that has been so carefully curated, Ukrainians are looked at as freedom fighters that are fighting for their right to exist, a right to live with autonomy and dignity, and their desire to have their own statehood and whatever else the media is spinning to create this narrative. Ukrainians are being looked at and lauded over as heroes that are going up against a powerful army, and we must do everything that we can to save them. Well, Palestinians are basically Ukrainians that have been fighting almost an identical narrative of war, whether mainstream media wants to show that or not. And they have been doing this for over 74 years, going up against the most powerful military in the world that has been set up by the US, EU, and Britain. The amount of hypocrisy when we look at Ukraine versus Palestine, it really has nothing to do with anything other than who is controlling the narrative. Ukrainians get to be freedom fighters, but a 13-year-old boy who sees no future for himself, that has been witnessing the horrific ethnic cleansing of his people, is labeled a terrorist. I'm not saying that what he did was right. What I am asking is for people to start asking what they would do. If an intruder came into what you perceive as your home, would you not stand up and defend your family? When we look at mass shootings here in the US, we know that so much of that is because of hurt and pain that is going unnoticed, untreated, and unfairly placing burdens on children that have reached a point of what they see as no return. I don't know about you, but I can empathize with that. I have had experiences in my life that give the time and space to say, I wouldn't do that act, but I understand it. Can you? In what I found to be an absolutely heartbreaking article by Mohammed El-Kurd for The Nation, one woman that he was interviewing said this: Western media outlets frame us as barbaric. They promote the idea that we throw ourselves onto death, eager to meet virgins in heaven. They don't ask, why do Palestinians throw stones? Or why is there an invasion in the village in the first place? We are told over and over that only some violence is worthy of condemnation and only certain lives matter. And that is true because so much of the narrative focuses on the losses and amplifies the losses, although they are so much smaller on the Israeli side. But those losses are looked at as more atrocious, more condemnable than when Israel eviscerates entire families, homes, and livelihoods. Sadly, the point is made in this article that perhaps the world ignores the incessant killings because Zionist violence is so relentless that it has become routine. Or perhaps it's because human rights organizations are hindered by Israeli bans and crackdowns on the groups. But more than likely, most slain Palestinians, especially those who have actively confronted the Israeli military occupation, do not meet the perfect victim prerequisite mandated by international media corporations. The height of ambition for young Palestinians is a full night's sleep, not interrupted by the army. We shouldn't grow up dreaming that our friends don't get killed. We shouldn't be lucky if we lived without losing 2 spots at the dinner table. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. If you want to know why Palestinians are so mad and taking the actions they are taking, like I said, they are to be condemned. But we can't pretend like it's because of nothing. It's because of everything. It's because of everything that they have been suffering at the hands of Israel and the weaponry and allowance by foreign nations that have turned a blind eye to the atrocities that Israel is inflicting on innocent people. It's all about the narrative spin. And aside from the narrative spin, which has played and continues to play a crucial role in the disparity of treatment between Israelis and Palestinians, the larger aspect of this goes to geography, resources, and intelligence. Palestine is in an arguably geographic stronghold, so it is critical for Western powers to do what they can to maintain and retain that stronghold. Western powers feel this need to project their power over the Arab world and are using Israel as that foothold in the region. Israel is essentially a proxy state, giving Western nations all the power and intelligence that having that level of power they have in the region provides. An even more egregious and frankly disheartening aspect of all of this is the fellow Arab nations that have taken the bait and allowed the divide and conquer colonialist strategy so commonly used by the Western nations to take root. They have failed to protect their fellow Palestinian brothers and sisters, sadly, in the name of capitalism. They could come together, they could remember their history and find a way back to each other, but they are so enticed by capitalism and all of the supposed power and control that they think the Western powers will give them because they are throwing the Palestinians to the wolves. There is so much shame and judgment that can and should be placed on the Arab world as well. Your Palestinian family is crying out for help. Where are you? I will end this video with this. More than 1 Palestinian has been killed a day on average in the first month of 2023. This means that we are looking to be on track to see double the tragic rate of lethal violence in the occupied West Bank from last year, which was already the highest on record since data was being collected by the UN in 2021. Israel, as the occupying power, is supposed to be and should be safeguarding the Palestinian civilians, but their actions of enticing and emboldening their own citizens to carry arms alongside the police and military is likely only going to exacerbate the pain, the suffering, and the killing of innocents. All in the name of Israel, somehow, some way, being the victim in this scenario. Well, thank you for watching this somewhat heated and passionate video. As you can see, I have a lot of feelings on this issue because it hits close to home. How do you feel about my comparisons here? Do you feel the same or disagree? Do you feel like the characterization of white supremacy and Nazis here in the States is a similar comparison to the far-right Israeli regime? If you would like to learn more about the far-right movement happening in Israel, feel free to check out this article, which is at endemictimes.com, which I will also link down in the description box below. Also, what do you think about the UN being placed on land donated by Rockefeller? Do you think there's any possible strings or oddness there? I sure do. Leave your comments down below. I'm sure this will be a heated discussion. Again, thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, share with those you think might like it, hit that notification bell for videos that are going to be coming out soon. And as always, stay safe, take care, and be kind to each other.